Hello and welcome to the channel for another exciting Zwift race. This race will be on the Diocchio Crit course. It's a fast and flat course. We'll be doing 10 laps on this course. This is the ZHR Masters race, which is a very interesting race format for Zwift. I've done this type of race format in the past, and I really enjoy it because it puts you in competition against people that are in your same age group. Not necessarily your category group, but your same age group. So I can be out there as an A-Cat racer racing against B-Cat racers or C-Cat racers, D-Cat racers. As long as they're in my age group and they chose the right category, then that's who I would be racing against. So 9 times out of 10, I'm going to beat anybody that's in my age group. I'm not tooting my own horn or anything on that. It's just how it is. I'm one of the faster, older Cat A racers that's out there. So I take pride in that. I work hard for that. I put the work in to get the results. And that's why I'm one of the faster A-Cat racers. But in this race format, I really like it. There are essentially 4 categories here. There's an A group, which is for people in the age range of 30 to 39. And then there's the B Cat group, which is ages 40 to 49. And then the C Cat group, which I'm in, is for the age group of 50 to 59, and then there's the D-Cat group, which is, I believe it's just 60 and up. I don't know if they do a go up to just 69, but it may just be 60 and up. But anyway, in those 4 groups, there's actually a division in those groups. So there's actually an age group of 30 to 34 that's in that group, and then there would be 35 to 39, and then there would be 40 to 44, and then 45 to 49, and so on and so forth on up through the groups. So in my group, which is C, which is in blue, we would have the 2 different split age groups. So when you're looking at the field itself, you don't really know who you're actually competing against for a win in that category or in that color group, because there's actually 2 groups within that group, if that makes any sense. But anyway, I'm trying to beat everybody in the field. I'm trying to win the overall race and beat everybody to the finish line. So regardless of what age group you're in, I'm trying to beat you. So with that said, I decided I wanted to change my bike. I was on a road bike before this race, or in my last race, and I wanted to get on my Tron bike. Whenever I'm in Diocchio, I want to be on my Tron bike so that I can get my glow going on. And as you can see, I made that switch and just changed the wheels to yellow so that I would stand out a little bit. Normally I would make my color match my kit, and because I was in blue, I probably would have put on a blue color scheme on the Tron bike, but I decided to go with yellow just to make sure that I stood out from anything that anybody else that may be doing the same thing. So we got off to a good start, a decent start. As you can see, there was a break from a bunch of other guys in the C-Cat that went out front, so normally I wouldn't go after them, but I decided I don't know if this break is going to stick or not, so I want to be up where the guys are that are making the break. So I put on the power to bridge back up to them. As you can see, we had a decent gap between our group of 4 and the rest of the group that we left behind. And that, to me, I thought, okay, this may stick. We may just be able to just ride away from the rest of this group. But Eventually they would catch us. This is a 10-lap race, and we probably weren't going to be holding that power that we were holding to get that gap, or to get that gap in the first place. So eventually the group will come back together, and we will all be again riding as one. As you may notice, there's one yellow rider in the group. He pretty much stays in touch with the field. That means he's in the 60 to 69 age category, or 69 and higher, and he pretty much stayed with the group throughout the whole race. So no knock on him. Big ups to him for staying in there. To tell you the truth, most of the people that do these races, or I've noticed that most of the people that are on Zwift are people that are in Masters to senior age group. A lot of the people that I race against are in their late 40s, early 50s, early 60s. So you can't really knock on the people's ages that are in these races. There's some pretty good competition all the time in these races. And granted, there are a lot of what I call kids in there, guys and ladies that are in their early 20s and early 30s. I call them kids. And there are actually kids that race in these races too. I've raced against 13-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 10-year-olds. So because of the way Zwift is structured with the power to weight ratio, it allows people that are lighter, much lighter, to compete against stronger riders that put out a lot more power. Power doesn't mean as much in the power to weight ratio for a lot of the people and a lot of the competition out there. So that's what makes the game or app great, and makes me enjoy it a lot more, because of the amount of competition that's out there and the amount of people that bring positivity to this game. I mean, there's some cheating in there. You can see that happen. You can see some people doing some crazy power and getting some crazy activities. I look at that as just, okay, it's a part of the game, and I tend to try and ignore it. But for the most part, as long as I find a group that I can ride with that will challenge me and make me give my best, then that's all I'm here for. I'm not getting paid to do any of this stuff. I'm not, even though these may be races, I don't win any money for it, so I'm not out anything by having people cheat. I mean, it becomes obvious when they're cheating, and I just tune them out, and I just race against the people that are around me. But for the most part, I enjoy it. I enjoy the competition. I consider myself a competition junkie. I've always been a competition junkie. Since the start of my triathlon and running careers, I did those things and do those things because I enjoy the competition, and I enjoy making myself excel through the efforts that I put into it to be better. Same thing with Zwift. I will record and look at videos of my racing to analyze them, to see what I did wrong, see what I can do better, and I always take on those challenges to make myself better. But let's get back to this race. So this race had a lot of spice in it. There were some attacks in it, and I was healthy when I was doing this race. And not that I ever not been unhealthy doing races. It was just, I felt strong. My legs were feeling good. This is another one of the longer races that I do. A lot of my races were what are called crit races, where they're fast and flat and quick, done in like 15, 20 minutes. And then I'll move on to something else. But I had started seeking out some longer races to do, just so that I could see how my legs would manage in a sprint after doing longer races. I actually did a couple of long, they technically weren't races, they were more group rides, but they were long. I did like a 73K ride where at the end I was forcing myself to do an all-out sprint. 60K rides, 50K rides, and just trying to get out of that mode of just always just doing short, fast, hard-hitting crit races, which I still love doing those, and I'll have to show you some of those videos from some of those that I've done. Eventually I'll catch up to where I'm doing newer videos of things that I'm doing now. I have some exciting stuff that I'm doing now, but right now I'm just catching up on some of my older videos that I recorded way back when, and just wanted to share some of that. But in this one, this was a fun race. This was a nice group to ride with. It seemed like everybody was somewhat equal, even though there was the disparity in our ages. That was borne out in the color that you wore, whether or not you were a youngster in your 30s or an old coot in your 60s. The color of the kit that you were wearing told you where you were. Normally in a Zwift race, you have no idea the ages of the people that you're racing against unless you personally know them or follow them or have been chatting with them back and forth or something like that. But for the most part, when you got the massive groups out there and you got either everybody in a different color kit, or maybe for a group race it may be the same color kit, you don't know the ages of those people that are around you. So that when you're fighting it out and you're coming to the end of the race, you don't know if that's a young kid or an old kid. At that point, it shouldn't be matter. You should just be trying to win, and that's where I always try and put my headspace is. Just try to win. Don't worry about it. Just do good. But this was a interesting race in the fact that you know that, okay, if I'm looking at all the people in the blue kits in this race, I know they're all in my age group. I don't know if I'm fighting for a win for them, if they're all in the bottom of the age group or the top of the age group. I know I'm in the top of the age group, but as far as them, I don't know. But I know that the guys that are in the red kits, I know those are the young kids. I know those are the kids that are in their 30s. They're more likely, they should have a little bit more stamina than I do. So looking at that, I would get it in my head that, okay, I'm trying to beat those guys. The guys in the red, those are the young kids. Those are the guys that I'm trying to beat. But the faster guys could be the guys that are in the green, that are in their 40s. And there are a lot of fast 40-year-olds out there. So I want to beat them also. And then there's the one guy that's in the yellow. I know that's an older guy. I want to beat him too. I want to beat them all. So in this case, it's just me trying to dictate what I'm doing in this race, whether or not I'm going to push to go to the front with any group that would take off. And as you can see, there's some ebbs and flows in this race where guys would kind of take off and then guys they would back off. There's as far as this course, for the most part, it is I'm not going to say pancake flat. There's some risers in there. There's some what we call kickers. There's some 2%ers in there. For the most part, it doesn't go much over maybe 3%. But those little kickers, you know, they keep you in tune as to what's going on, because you can easily fall off if you hit a kicker at the wrong time and you're not on the power and the rest of the group is on the power. So you have to pay attention to those little things, but it's not as drastic as, say, something that's like 5 or 6% or higher than that. Those are the ones that can be dangerous, where if you're not on par with everybody else, out the back you go. But in this case, it's just pretty much paying attention to whether or not somebody makes an attack or not. In this case, I want to chase down attacks. I've decided that that's what I wanted to do in this race. I'm not going to hang off the back. You'll notice that I'm either in the middle or maybe in the front for the majority of this race, because I've decided that I didn't just want to dangle off the back and try and save my legs. And this one, I wanted to press a bit. I wanted to see how my legs would react to me pressing for the whole almost 40K of this race, and then get into a sprint off just to see how much power. This one, I was just totally looking to see how much power that I could put into a sprint at the end of this race. So even though I may have hit a little power to bridge a gap or to bring back an attack or something like that, I was challenging myself throughout this whole race to be able to do that and still to be able to perform a good sprint at the end. Because that, back when I was early in my Zwift career, that was one of the things that I couldn't do, is that I would, if I was in like a group ride or something like that and we were riding tentatively slow, nothing really fast, nothing really hard, that I could put out a lot of power. I can put out what I call a spike, where I would spike the power and then get off the gas and let myself coast back down, and then let the rest of the group catch back up to me, and then continue on with the group ride that I was doing. But generally, that was normally being ridden at like a recovery pace. So I would just do those things in group rides where I would put up some serious spikes. I could easily put up a 1200 to 1300 watt spike and then just back off. But I had noticed that when I was in a race and it came to the end of a race and I had to sprint, I was lucky if I could get 900 watts. Majority of the time it was like 900 watts, sometimes 700 watts, because I couldn't get my legs to fire and go with the power after coming off of a longer ride, or any ride that had any distance in it where I was on the power and using up my legs. So I don't know if I was just burning my matches too early or what. I just knew that I could not sprint the way I could do just in a regular group ride when I was just attacking something to get a spike. So that was something that I had worked on, and worked on it for the most part throughout my BCAT career. And as I progressed and started to move towards the top of the B category, I started to get to the point where at the end of a race, I can top 1,000 watts, or I can top 1,100 watts. Not much more than that, but just 1,000 or 11. And I was happy about that, because that was enough power for me to win races. I started winning races in BCAT, and at one point it got easy. For lack of a better word, it just got easy. I mean, I would hang out in the back or hang out in the middle of the group and just ride along and just save my legs and then wait for the sprint and then boom, win the sprint. Or if I wasn't winning the sprint, I was either second or third. I was always on the podium, or in the rare case, I would just miss out on the podium because I made the mistake. Either I started too late on the sprint, or I started too early on the sprint, or I didn't have the right power up or something like that, and would finish off the podium. So at one point, it got to where I was doing crit races, but I would do mass category sprint races where there were both, where all the categories would be together. So it wouldn't just be like an A cats racing against A's and B's racing against B's and C's racing against C's. Everybody would join together and then everybody would go off. And then I started noticing that even though I was beating all of the BCAT racers, I was beating a large number of the ACAT racers. And I was like, maybe I need to move up. I should have moved up, but I didn't move up. I waited for the category guards to move me up. And I moved up to ACAT and immediately started getting destroyed. Just destroyed. And it was more so because of climbing. When it came to climbing, and the A-cat racers, and I'm going to say A and A plus cat racers, their climbing abilities were just so much more, I'm going to say, powerful, advanced than mine was, that I would always get dropped when we hit a climb. And I couldn't hold on to them, and I would fall off. And I found that it was just because of the way that I was riding. I got to a point where I was a high cadence rider, so that when I got on the hills, I would stay in that high cadence and wouldn't get out of the seat. And if I didn't get out of the seat, now I'm just spinning and spinning and spinning, and just completely depending on my aerobic capabilities. And once my heart rate hits, mid 170s and something like that, I couldn't hold on. I would started to fall off, and it wasn't that so much that I was completely losing power. It's just that their power was just maybe a 1 watt per kilogram or half a watt per kilogram more than mine consistently. And because of that, I would slowly fall off, and then I would fall out of any draft that may be there, and then I would fall more off, and then I'd get to the point to where my brain would tell me, okay, you don't have it, back off, fall to another group, and race with another group. And that's what I would do. And eventually what happened was, because there was a period I wasn't racing as much, I was doing a lot of group rides and things like that, my category number, my race category number came down. And when it came down, it dropped me out of the A and then dropped me back into B. And I'm going to say I was kind of happy about that, just because I didn't have to have the pressure of racing in A unless I wanted to race in A. And I went back to B and started racing back in B again. And it was fun because I wasn't getting dropped. And I stayed into that for not as long as I was originally in it the first time, but Eventually, I got back to racing, and I got back to the point to where they raised my category back up from a B to an A. And at that point, I had done the Zwift Academy Road, where it's an academy for cycling. I had done the Zwift Academy Tri, and doing those workouts in those two academies, I'd say taught me how to ride the hills better. I improved my aerobic capacity. I improved a lot, and I saw where if I just held on long enough to get over the hill, then those faster guys, they all slowed down, and it allowed you to recover. So I got to a point to where when I went back to A, I was actually ready for A. I was actually ready for it. And I went into my first couple races, and they were crit races. And I went into a couple of those knowing that, okay, if I didn't get dropped and I held on and I was there for a sprint, there was a good chance that I was going to finish on the podium, or that I could possibly win. Every race that I did, I knew that if I went into the final sprint, there was a chance that I could win or get on the podium. So at that point, it was more so me just learning the ropes of the ACAT riders and what ACAT riders did, and how people manipulated races based on their strengths and their abilities. So going into a race like this, where at the time I'm an ACAT racer, but I'm a relatively new ACAT racer, I wanted to test out my strengths against other ACAT racers that at the time I don't know who's an ACAT racer in this event at all. All I know is that the people in the blue are in my age group. So when I'm looking at a race like this, it's just, okay, how do I feel? Where's my heart rate? Whether or not I'm getting recovery or not. I know if my timeline graph down there shows that I'm in the gray or blue or green, I'm in a recovery effort, and the last thing people want to do is let me go into a sprint when I'm in that green, blue, gray area for any length of time more than, say, a minute. That's a complete recovery for me, and I know I will have legs at the end of something like that. So even these kind of races now, even the longer races, I know what I need to do to be able to have the best sprint possible for me. Now this particular race has power-ups in it. And early on, I got an aero power-up, which is that little helmet little symbol, the little blue helmet symbol there. And that means that I get a 15-second aero advantage through for the time that's active. I decided that even though this is a crit race and we're crossing banners probably like 20 times, like we're going to cross this sprint banner here, if I had used my aero power up, I would have gotten a new one after that banner. In this race, I got that arrow very early on and decided I wasn't going to use it at all unless I needed it. That's a lot of time going through banners in this Miocchio crit course and not taking advantage of being able to use the power up on each time. I just decided I wasn't going to use it, that I was just going to plod my way through the whole race and not use it until the very end. Kind of strange. Now that I think about it, kind of putting myself at a disadvantage because I'm not using the power-ups that are being afforded to me each time I go through one of those banners. And I think I go through banners probably 3 or 4 times each lap that I don't take advantage of that 15 to 30 seconds of relief from using either a draft power-up or in this case, arrow power-up or whatever power-up that may pop up. But I don't know why I felt like I would be taking a chance of using it and then not having it at the end when I'm going through these banners so many times that more than likely I probably could have gotten that arrow power up 3 or 4 more times. It's completely random, but I could have. But I decided I wanted to keep it. I didn't feel like it was hindering me not to use a power up. I was always able to make up any gap or attack or anything like that happened throughout the race. So I just sat on it. But in hindsight, maybe if I did this race again, I would use the power just to take advantage of that relief. Why not? It can't hurt me. And I know, based on how I sprint now, today, as I'm uploading or getting ready to upload this video to YouTube, that I can actually go into a sprint without a power up, especially with a group this size, and still be able to push enough power to get my way through this using whatever power up they play in their draft and still win the race. I think I got it like that. But hey, it is what it is. But as you can see over on the right, you got the older guys, the guys in the blue, that are just chatting away. Where they're talking about how old guys rule. Well, we do rule. And this was a fun race, and it was nice to mix it up with this group of guys. It got really chatty after the end of this particular race, when the guys were talking about things, and we were talking about how just how the race went. And that's one of the things that I like about Zwift, is most of the races that I do, a lot of the races that I do, after the race is done, the guys will start, chatting up and saying how, whether or not they thought you did great or something like this, and giving each other kudos and taps on the back. Because when you're looking at this, every one of these riders or every one of these avatars is some guy in some basement or some hall or some garage sweating it out in whatever country, in whatever time zone, because the time zones could vary wildly, obviously. And they're working just as hard as you are working to get to the end of this race. This particular race was great because there were no quote-unquote cheaters in it. So there's nobody flying off the front doing crazy watts or doing crazy things that kind of upsets the apple cart. Nobody doing anything like that. So that was a nice thing about it. One thing I did hear about this one guy in the red there, who came up as Goodwill Hunting. I heard after the fact that he had signed up for the wrong age group. So I think he was in the 30 to 39 age group. I think he signed up as an ACAT racer thinking he was going into ACAT, but that he was actually in the 50 to 59 age group. I believe one of the guys told me that after the fact. So he made a mistake and just signed up for the wrong category. In the grand scheme of things, doesn't really hurt anything. It's not like they him out. I think he did end up in the results. He was just in the, I think he might have come in third or something in that particular age group that he was signed up for, the 39, when he should have been in a different age group. But it is what it is. It happens. People make mistakes. It was not a mistake. He still raced good in this race and stayed with the lead group for the most part, and there wasn't that much of an issue. But the reason why I like this course is because it does have quite a few sprint segments in it. So if you're out there just trying to teach yourself how to sprint or teach yourself timing on sprints and sprint segments, this particular world is what Zwift calls it. Neokyo is its own world. There are lots of opportunities to do some sprint work, either inside of Neokyo or outside of it in in Mercury, where there are some smaller sprint segments that you can get in and get after. Is Neokyo the world? Is it, or is Mercury the world? I don't know. I think Neokyo is the world. But anyway, it's a fun course. It's an interesting course, and there are some great places to do some sprint work. There's one section in Neokyo where you probably can hit, or one course where you can probably hit 5 or 6 different sprint segments throughout the loop of the course. And I gotta tell you, if you're at speed and you try and do 5 to 6 all-out sprints, it can really tap you out. I think sprinting taps my legs out more than just out riding a race does, because I put so much effort into my sprints. There are sometimes I can get very violent on my bike when I'm sprinting, to the point to where the bike is actually hopping up and up off the ground. I'd say at least a foot or more, because I tug on my handlebars so hard. I'll watch some videos where people are sprinting and they show themselves on their video throughout the ride, and I can tell they're just using all lower body, and just trying to stomp through the power. And that's not me. I use both my upper and lower body, and I pull and I tug on my handlebars. I remember when I first started sprinting, I thought I was going to rip my handlebars off the bike. I was pulling so violently on them. But they're still on the bike, so I haven't broken them yet. But yes, I do use my upper body, and it becomes like a dance, because you got to be in sync. Once you get out of sync, that's when the bike starts to hop, and you start to push the bike around, because you're either on the down pedal on your dominant leg, and then the up pull on your dominant arm, and there's times where I really get out of sync, and then there's times where it just feels so perfect that the bike doesn't feel like it's moving. I'm tugging and I'm pushing, and the bike just stays planted. That's when I know I got it right. And a lot of that depends on your gearing. You have to have the right gearing on your bike. I have a totally different gearing setup for Zwift than I do on my normal rims that I ride with outdoors. I believe I have a 1125, I think I have, and that gives me one gear in the middle of my sprocket that's missing from my other sprocket, and I believe it's a 16 tooth sprocket or gear. and it sits right in the center of my cassette. And it turns out that that's my riding gear on Zwift. So when I'm plodding along at like 3.5 watts per kg, that's normally the gear I'm in. If I need to ease off a little bit, I will shift up once. If I need to apply a little bit more power, I may shift down one from that one. But for the most part, that center gear is my riding gear, and it tends to be the gear that I stay in the most. And when sprinting, your gearing choice makes a lot of difference. I see some people that completely spin out. You could see their legs going 1,000 miles an hour, and then I'll look up and look at their cadence, and their cadence is like 110, 115, and I'm like, dude, you're spinning out. And what happens is you start to lose pressure on the gear because the power starts to come down. And when that power starts to come down and you're in that easy gear, you don't get as much pressure to hold that power back up. So you don't want to spin out. Got to make sure you're going in the right gear. If you go in too low of a gear, then the power is actually going to fight back on you. And what I mean by that is, as you're pedaling, it's going to get harder and harder to pedal towards the end of that. And I call that the trainer fighting back. I overshift before when I shifted down into too low of a gear, and had that happen to me towards the end of a sprint, and just couldn't keep the turnover going because it got harder and harder. So if you get yourself in the wrong too hard gear, you're gonna lose it on the back end. If you get yourself in too easy of a gear, you're also going to lose it on the back end, because you're going to get what I call over the top of that gear, where you're spinning and your power will start to come down. And because you're spinning so hard, you can't get the pressure to bring that power back up or to hold it up. So then in that case, you're over the top of the gear. And then there's what I call on top of the gear. There's an over the top of the gear, and there's on top of the gear. When you're in the right gear, that you're spinning like 110, maybe about 110 RPM, and you're holding your power steady, then you're on top of the gear. And you can hold that power much longer, and it's not as hard to hold it there because your cadence is high enough to dictate you're holding it at that power. It's weird. If you've ever done a Zwift workout and you've worked out in ERG mode, ERG mode will teach you how to sprint. I honestly believe that. ERG mode will teach you how to sprint if you know how to effectively use ERG mode. And I learned that in a couple of Zwift Academy races where we had to do this low cadence drill where we had to spin at 70 RPM but hold the power at, like, I don't know, for me I think it was like 240 watts or something like that. And it was insanely hard to hold that low cadence for that power range. And then we'd get to a banner where it was getting ready to switch to another segment, and it was going to go up to 340 watts. But I had to up my cadence to like 110. And what I would do is I would spin as fast as I can before it made that switch to that higher power, to get my cadence up high to the point to where once it made the switch, all I had to do was bring my cadence down a little bit, to match the 110, but it wasn't as hard because I was already up there in the cadence before I waited for that, go through that arch for it to change to the other segment, and then have to fight from a low cadence to get up to that high cadence at that high power. And I found that, I don't know if I was cheating the workout or whatever, but I didn't have to do that hard tugging to get up to that higher cadence for that power to make it easier on my legs. And then I noticed that there were people that were sprinting that way. They would start off they would switch to their sprinting gear, which was a harder gear, and they would be at a lower RPM, somewhere around 65, and then you could see them stomping on the pedals, grinding to get that cadence up for their sprint. And then by the time they got up to where their power range was and their cadence higher, they were tired, and then their power would fall off. And I'm like, that's the way a track sprinter would sprint. Have this god-awful hard gear that they would have to stomp through before they can get their cadence up high enough to be able to go faster on the bike, producing more power. Well, you have shifters. Shift those gears. You don't have to do that. Shift those gears and use them to get you already in that higher cadence before you need that high power. So that's what I do in my sprints. At some point, I will actually do a sprint video where I'll try and explain more as to how I sprint, because my power to weight ratio is nuts. And when I say that, that means that little orange number that appears over on the right hand side in the board, your watts per kilogram. When you see somebody pushing a 20 over there, you know that they're a really good sprinter. They know what they're doing. That number, you don't come by that number easily. I mean, obviously you can probably cheat, do what's called weight doping, where you put in an insanely low weight when you don't actually weigh that and then stomp it out. But then, you can see that in a person's heart rate throughout a race, where it doesn't look like they're working hard at all to produce some crazy watts. So in that case, yeah, you can see some crazy numbers over there. Or I know there are some people that probably think, I might have been cheating or something like that. There was one time I did a sprint where I put a 22.3 orange number over on the board. And it wasn't because I pushed more power, it's because I had a feather power, which gives you a 10% boost in power. So that number probably looked crazy, but that was the reason why that number was there, was because I had a feather power up that I used in a timely fashion to take advantage of that power. But in those cases, there's all kinds of sprinters out there. I know there's one guy that I watched his video. I think his name is Christopher Watts Wheelhouse or something like that. That guy, I saw a video where he did a sprint and he put 1,800 watts up on the board. 1,800 watts. I was like, oh my God, that's insane. But when you look at his orange number, his watts per kilogram, it was right around about what I could push because of his weight. He weighed so much more than I did. So I'm at 66 kilograms. He's like at 100 plus kilograms or something like that. So because of that disparity disparity in our weight. Even though he has an insane wattage number of 1800 watts, that translated to somewhere around an 18 watts per kilogram on the board. And we've been in a couple of races. I've done a couple of races against him. They're short sprint races where he's gotten the better of me all 3 times that we've raced. And there was one race where, well, I was close. But I enjoy that because that's a challenge for me. Makes me better, makes me work hard at it. And that's what I do. I will take that video and analyze the video and see what it is that I need to do differently to maybe best him the next time. I'm sure we'll get into one of those races again at some point, and I'm looking forward to it. But looking back at this race that I'm just completely talking over, we're in the last lap, final stages of this race. I'm looking at my graph there. My heart rate's down at 166. That's perfect. I'm loving it. Recovery mode for me. I see some blues on there, some grays. Where our power's trying to peak back up a little bit, and that's only because we're going up the 2% kicker. But even that's going to level out. So at this point, I'm setting up for a good sprint. Feeling good. I'm sure I got it in my legs to take this. Like I said, I'm not just competing against the guys in the blue. I'm competing against everybody. I want to beat everybody to the line. So this should be a good challenge for me. There's a couple more little kickers that we're going to go through that we have to get through. I know I have to push a little bit of power to get through those to make sure I stay attached to the group. 2% doesn't seem like a lot, but they're gradual. They're gradual. When they're gradual, that means you have to stay on the power a little bit longer or stay on the pressure a little bit longer to make sure you hold on. Depending on what the rest of the group is doing, whether or not there are going to be some people that are going to try and take off early or not. Have to be wary of that. Make sure that doesn't happen. If somebody does a big break at 2K to go, I would probably go with them just to make sure that I'm attached. That would probably affect my sprint. But then in that case, I would have to decide, even if they made that break and I make the break with them, will they have more legs than I do when it does come time to sprint? And for the most part, it looked like everybody's toned it down. It looks like everybody was going to wait for that sprint. And when that happened, I get a little excited, to tell you the truth, because I know at that point it's mano a mano. Who can push the power? Who's got it in them? 1.5K left. I know I have an aero boost. I know that I can either go from the back of this group and take their draft and use my draft, or I can actually go to the front of the group and use my draft and try and power away enough of a gap to where I would break any draft that they would have. And based on the way I'm lingering in the back, I've decided that I'm going to come from the back. I'm not going to come from the front. So at this point, I'm just trying to pace myself, not to put too much power to roll myself to the front, but not to have too little power to get myself rolled off the back, or not technically completely rolled off the back, but so far back that I can't make that people can get away in the front and I wouldn't be able to catch them. So at this point, I'm just going to sit back and get ready to do my thing. 7/10 of a K left. This is going to go by fast. 6/10 of a K. I'm getting ready. I do what's called a ramp up, where I do my hard pedal, where I get myself into the gear that's closest to the one that I'm going to use to sprint in. I will use that one to power up. I can see an orange number go. I can see power ups going. That means guys are going, and then I hit mine. At this point, we'll just watch it play out. Boom. Done. Over. This particular ride or event didn't show a winner banner. It just basically showed the timer end. We would have to go to Zwift Power to see the end results, and I'm going to let this play out a little bit until we can get to that. But that was a good effort. You saw the wattage, the raw watts that I put out, and how the closing speed is so much different once you know how to hold power high. It's not so much as getting up there and hitting a bit watt number and then letting that number come back down. It's getting up there and holding that power stable. If you get over your gear and you're spinning, that power is going to fall off towards the end. If you get on top of the gear and hold it there, that it's such a good feeling. It's such a good feeling to know that you're holding your power and it's not tailing off. And a lot of times I don't see the wattage numbers on the screen because I'm looking down. I have my bars. I'm grabbing onto my bars. My eyes may be closed, but I'm digging the same way that avatar is digging. And I don't see any of the numbers that will come up because I'm not looking. But at some point, I will get to where my cadence is stabilized and my power is stabilized, and then that's when I will look up and we'll see whether or not I need to keep digging at it or if it's a done thing. And at that point, I could see that those two guys they were far ahead of me, and that I was really going to have to stay in it to get to them. Stay in it to get to them, and I was able to pull that off. So in that case, I was happy that I got my win. I executed the way I wanted to execute. I was slightly late on that. I probably should have started a little earlier. Normally, I have my distance where I want to react, and in this case, it was at 300 meters. I probably should have started a little earlier. I didn't know whether or not I had that much in my legs. Evidently I did. I had a nice long green blue section with a little yellow, so I definitely should have started at around 350, maybe even 400 meters. Then that race wouldn't have even been that close. It would not have been that close. So it is what it is. I got the job done. Let's switch over to Zwift Power and see what the results were. Here you can see that I ended up being in the F group, and that I won my group. Like showing me the overall, and there were actually five people in my group, in the blue group. They were all in my age group, so all of us are 50 plus, but it doesn't show whether or not we fell into the 50 to 54 or the 55 to 59. Doesn't really say. Actually, the F is the 54 to 59, because you can see that we're 50 plus here, and then the E is also 50 plus, so these guys were the 50 to 54. So it's a great job, enjoyed it. You can see that I pushed the most watts per kilogram in the race, 16 watts per kilogram for 15 seconds. And for 30 seconds, I got 11.3 watts per kilogram. And then my 1 minute time and stuff tails off where other riders had a little more power than me for those. But this is my sprint. This is the other guy's sprints. This must be the two guys that I passed towards the end. But there you go. Great job. So it was a great race. It was a fun race. Looking forward to bringing you more of my races. And with that, I'm going to have to say, have a good one. Hey.